My name is Patrick Williams. Well, actually, it has a doctor in front of it, but I never use that anyway. I'm going to start with where I was here in the UK. I was born in Wales, and I lived here until I was 6, and then I went to live in Trinidad, where my father was born. And before that, while living here, I got interested in dance because I'd actually seen dance in terms of going to the theatre. My mum took me when I was very young, and I was enthralled, and she couldn't believe that someone at the age of 3, 4 could be so enthralled with the movement and everything. I remember I saw, and I'll tell you what it was, I saw Petit-Pas Swan Lake, and that is not a very easy Swan Lake to watch, right? And I remember seeing this and thinking, okay, I'm fascinated. So she enrolled me in dance lessons in Oxford, and to the horror, was told that actually we don't have lessons for him. I remember standing there hearing this and wondering, what did they mean? I was 5 years old at the time and being told that we don't have lessons for him. And I'm watching other boys that were there and I'm thinking, well, what's different from me to them? And my mother was pulled aside and she was told. My mother became so furious. I remember I'd never seen her so angry in all my life. And she just grabbed my hand and took me out. And I said, have I done something wrong? She says, no, you haven't done something wrong, but they have, right? And I got to the point where I learned my mother's language very early. And when she was in that mood, you didn't tangle with her at all. So as to clarify, my grandmother was white, my grandfather was white, my mother was white, my father was black. I think that was the first time that I encountered racism, but racism associated with a skill that I was going to produce later on in life. Those words kept with me for quite a bit. And I remember we moved to Trinidad when I was 6 because it was the year of the independence of Trinidad and Tobago from the United Kingdom. And I was there and I suddenly was pushed into the arena of politics because my father's brother was the Prime Minister of the country. And he was also my godfather. And he asked me a question. He said, what do you want to do later on in life? And I said, I want to dance. And he looked at me and he says, if that is what you want to do, and you can't think of anything else, then you're a dancer. And that was very wise words, because this kiss came from a prime minister, and I'm thinking, well, okay, you know. My mother was already supporting this. My father was a little bit dubious, but here was my uncle, who was the patriarch of the family, who was the prime minister saying, you're going to be a dancer. And not a prophetic word was ever uttered. That was very true, because that is what I became. And they moved heaven and earth. When my mother then revealed to my father, again I was eavesdropping, as you do as children. You listen in at the door, and you know that they're talking about you. And I heard them say something in the region of, this is racist. And not understanding what that terminology meant at all, I kind of didn't realize. Now, you have to understand the context of my family. My father's mother was French Creole, right? And she came from an old stock of French Creoles that existed. And she was the one that opposed the dance. She was the one that said, no, you can't do this. Black boys don't do this. And I'm thinking, says who? Now, at the age of 13, I started to do some movement with a woman in Trinidad called Beryl McBurney. Now, I'm not sure how many people know who she was, but she was a graduate of the Horton School of Technique. She was all back there. And I saw things that she was doing that made me want to do that as well. And much later on, in the early 70s, I remember going to the theater in Trinidad with my mother. And it was the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. And they did Revelation. And for the first time in my life, I sat there. In fact, actually, I didn't sit. I was standing through the whole performance that they had to keep pulling me back down to sit down because there were people behind that couldn't see. But I was so enthralled by what I was seeing. And I said to my mother, I said, that is what I want to do. Why can't I not do that? How come they could do it and I can't? And she said, they are liberated and you will be in your own self, when you get the chance. And I remember challenging a woman in Trinidad, a white woman who had a dance school. She was called Thora Dumbell, and she came from the English type of background, that actually she was the first person that said what no one else said. You are black. You cannot do classical dance. You do not have the right physique or technique. And I looked at her and I thought, you haven't even watched me dance. How could you make that statement? There was lots of movement moving around inside of me, right? It was there in my body, but I did not know how to channel it. And I needed someone to channel that for me, right? And that's how I began to see it later on when I met Beryl McBurney, who was beginning to channel that form of movement that I had. And that was how I began to grow up. So by the time I got into a proper dance school, my brain, my body, my feet, my arms, my legs, all were moving to a tune and to a drum that I did not know was there, but it was. I remember when I went to the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, I was learning. I saw a couple of dancers, and I thought, you know what? If they could do that, so can I. So I did. I tried. I nearly broke my ankles the first time, but then I did. And I learned how to dance on point, which was quite a strange thing for a man to do, but let alone a black man, right? Here we see a black man dancing on point. What is this that we're looking at? This is a different type of person. This is an enigma. This is not a real person. I always remember the ballet called Giselle. And I was looking at the principal male dancer, who was the prince. And I remember there was a sequence in it. And through this sequence, I was copying. He was out front, I was in the back there. And he started dancing on tiptoe. And I was following him, and I had not even realized that I did the same movements, but on point. And everyone turned from watching him like this to watching me. And I hadn't realized that they were watching me. And when this happened, in the room, unbeknown to me, well, I didn't know who he was at the time, was Rudolf Nureyev, right? And Nureyev was sitting there, and he was watching, thinking, okay, now this is an interesting person here, right? And at the end of it, the principal dancer, I looked at him with a smile, and he looked back at me with a frown, like he was going to burst my mouth or something. And I'm thinking, well, what did I do? What did I bloody do? Why is he angry at me? And I remember that he came across to me and he says, never do anything like this again. And I thought, do what? Because I hadn't realized that I had done that. And Nureyev came to me and he said, I want you to come back with me to Paris. And I thought, why? Why do you want me? And he said, you are amazing. And I looked at him thinking, what's he up to? He said, don't you realize what you can do? And I said, what I can do, anybody can do. And he stopped me, he says, no. He says, that guy couldn't do it. Why do you think he came across and told you not to do that again? Right? He said, did you not realize what you did? He was dancing on tiptoe, you danced on point. The whole sequence. He said, we need you in Paris. I said, Europe doesn't like me. England doesn't like me. He says, they will when I'm finished. And I remember that. And he put me to dance the same ballet in the same role. Paris had never seen a black prince. Oh, by the way, where I was working or where I was learning my skill was at Paris Opera. And this was a time when Nureyev was the artistic director of this. And I had the sanction of Alvin Ailey to go and do this. He was much more alive, very much alive at that point. But I wanted to actually do Revelation. I wanted to dance in that. I knew the part I wanted, and I told him, that's the part I want. And of course, in all of it, there's only one male solo, and that was the one I wanted. and he looked at me and he says, you're a tenacious man, right? He said, but you know what? Whatever you want, you will get. He says, you have that. Face up to everything that's going. And then he said to me, I remember when I was going to Paris, he came to me and he said, I'm not telling you good luck, all right? I'm telling you, be strong. And I'm thinking, what's he saying? What's there that he knows that's coming at me that I don't know about? And he said, no. He said, you can face it, but be strong. Don't give in. Be strong. And I remember doing that. I went out to do The Prince and Giselle, and the audience were deadly silent, and I nearly tripped up. And I remember looking in the wings, and Nureyev was watching me, and I thought, oh my God, this man will kill me if I mess up his ballet. So I thought, I don't care what the audience says. I don't have to face them. I have to face him. So let me dance this properly. So I did, and at the end of it, suddenly there was this, I don't know what happened. The world had gone into a different phase. It had suspended. It was quiet. And then, out of the blue, they rose on their feet to that piece. And I was standing there. The curtain was coming down, and the tears were running down my eyes because I couldn't believe that I did it. That was the first time that I found that people saw me as a black dancer. I stayed at Paris Opera 3-4 years, right? I left Paris Opera before Nureyev died. I remember coming back to the UK. In fact, actually, I dreaded coming back to the UK because I was thinking I was going to meet the same nonsense that I met before. But suddenly, every door was being opened. Places that told me that they didn't want me suddenly wanted me. And I thought, you know what? I am going to do something that I have never done before. I'm going to stick 2 fingers up at them, you know. And I remember I looked at English National Ballet and Birmingham Royal Ballet. I didn't even consider the Royal Ballet because they were the ones that didn't want me at all. And I chose English National to work with. And I went to work in their school, which was quite good because I had all the new prominent dancers were coming up from there. Then I got a message. I remember this. I got a message from Paris telling me that you'd better come and watch this performance. And it was Rudolph's last performance. And I remember asking, well, why do I need to? And nobody would tell me the reason why. And when I got there, face to face, I remember that De Moriarty, that was what her last name was, Moriarty. She came and she said, Nureyev is dying. And I said, what? But he's going to dance. What do you mean he's dying and he's going to dance? I said, that's precisely why he's going to dance. This is his last ever dance. In terms of the UK, there was still racism. That glass ceiling was still there, right? While I was at the English National Ballet, they did not have one black dancer. They had a black choreographer, me, but they didn't have one black dancer. I had a class of only white students. And I looked at this and I thought, there has got to be something wrong. I am the head of dance. I am black. I have In fact, actually, all of my tutors that were under me, all of them were white. I was the only black one, and I was controlling all of this. And I did not have one single black student. And I just pulled all my lecturers together, and I said, have you noticed that we have no black students? And one of the women, Amanda Parr, very good friend, she said, yes. What are we going to do about it? And I said, well, we have to change this. We have to change this. What about those black kids who want to dance but can't do it? And she said to me, she said, instead of forcing this particular style of dance out there, why not change it? Change the emphasis. Bring hip-hop into it, and then introduce ballet. I was a little bit deceptive in what I was doing because I had done street dance. I hid it for quite a while of what I had done, right? My students didn't know, because I was projecting this image of ballet and contemporary, right? They didn't know until somebody went and did some research and found that I was on the Michael Jackson video of Thriller. And I thought, well, I'm outed now. I can't do anything about it. I'm really outed. Tell us who else you dance with. And I said, oh, well, I dance with Rudolph Nureyev. He said, no, not that side, the other side. And I looked at them thinking, and I remember thinking, what have they found out? What do they know that I don't know? And I said, okay, well, I danced with Jackson, yes, as you know that. I said, and I danced with Janet Jackson, his sister, on her Rhythm Nation tour. And they were like, wow. Yes, I danced with her, and I danced with Madonna, and they were like, and I said, well, I'll tell you the story about that later on in a minute. And I danced with Grace Jones, and they were like, who is she? And one person said, oh my God. Right? My vice principal at the end of it. But she realized that, yeah, this is something. She called me later on. She said to me, we have, our school is in an area where there are lots of different nationalities. She said, what about if we did a specific campaign to get black students in, and that this was a specific class for them? You had a specific class for them. And I said, no. Right? I said, that's ghetto-fying these kids. They have to amalgamate. And she looked at me and she said, okay. I said, putting them aside makes them feel that they're different. Bringing them together makes them feel that they're part. There is no ideal body for ballet. I don't know where they get this thing from. If you've got the ability to dance and to be able to move and to be able to work and understand the techniques and use those techniques and demonstrate them, then that's great. And this idea that you have flat feet or not flat feet or whatever is rubbish. I had flat feet, but I was able to dance on point. There is no, and these restrictions that they put up, you have to be a certain weight. You have to be a certain, no. Right? I danced with someone who they told her all the time, you're putting on weight, you've got to be at this weight. She became anorexic, she is dead. Right? And from that day, I am an advocate that no student should have to, no dancer. It is still the same. It is still that prejudice that's out there. You know, that they think that some roles a black person can do and some roles a black person can't. And we need to have more Carlos Acostas. We need to have a principal black ballerina to rise above the parapets, right? With a leading man who is black to dance some of the most prestigious ballets and have white dancers in the corps de ballet, right? While these are out there in the open up front. Right? That's the only way these glass ceilings are going to be. Stay strong. That was a piece that Alvin Ailey told me. Be strong. Stand up for what you believe.